I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the car that Genesis has been waiting for, the new GV70 midsize SUV. The GV70 is Genesis's long-awaited rival to SUVs like the Audi Q5, the Mercedes GLC, and the BMW X3. This is really the heart of the luxury SUV segment here in Australia. Now, if you're a subscriber to the channel, you know that I've been running a GV80 SUV for 6 months, and that's the rival to cars like the BMW X5 and sort of the Audi Q7. It's that bigger size of luxury SUV. But the GV70 is really the vehicle that's pitched at where the numbers really are here in Australia. So to say that it's been a long time coming for Genesis would be an understatement. So with all of that riding on the GV70, in today's video, we're going to figure out whether this SUV really has the chops to take on those well-known German luxury crossovers. And well, it's put its best foot forward with the one I've got today. This is the 3.5 litre turbocharged V6 petrol with all of the trimmings. It's considerably cheaper than an Audi SQ5, but it promises to be about that fast on the road. We'll check that out later. And we've also got reviews coming of the diesel and the 4-cylinder petrol, which you can get as a rear-wheel drive, which is quite interesting. So in today's video, we'll jump inside the GV70, check out the interior, we'll have a look at the back seats and the boot, we'll discuss running costs, and then we'll get out onto the road in the GV70 3.5 litre turbo to see what this SUV is all about. Before we get started, hit subscribe below the video. Jumping into the cabin of the GV70, you enter an interior that's really unlike any other vehicle in this segment, and that's a good thing. Genesis are pretty much going their own way, in my opinion, in terms of exterior design, interior design, and even how the cars drive, and we'll get into that when we take this GV70 3.5 out onto the road. The first thing to get your head around is the structure of the GV70 range, because there are 3 engines and you pick one of those first, and then you can add various packs on top of them to make the exterior and the interior look cooler. Now here in the 3.5, the top engine, you get the sport pack as standard, but for another 6.5 grand, you can add the luxury package, which brings Napa leather, a Lexicon by Harman stereo, suede headlining, a whole bunch of cool features. But on the 4-cylinder models, you have to option both a sport package and a luxury package if you want the best of all those worlds. Now, if you go for a GV70 with the sport package, like all 3.5s, or optionally on the 4-cylinder cars, then you do get a racier interior. You get a different steering wheel. It loses that rugby ball shape that is standard on the GV70 and the GV80. And in terms of color and trim on the interior, the sport models give you a choice between black, red, or navy blue leather with red stitching. And you also get this very cool illuminated geometric trim on the doors as well, which is pretty nice. However, if you skip the sport pack on the 4-cylinders and instead you just option up the luxury package, you actually have a much broader choice of interior colors. Black, beige, tan, burgundy, even dark green leather can be optioned on a GV70 without the sport package, so that's quite interesting. Color and trim aside though, the technology package in here is pretty cool. All GV70s get this 14.5-inch touchscreen up here. It is a touchscreen, but you also have this rotary knob down here to control it. And this is better than the knob in the G80 and GV80 because it's actually raised up, so you can use it nice and easily. The screen has wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, sadly not wireless, unlike an X3 or a Q5. And if you go for an optioned up spec, you get this 12.3-inch fully digital instrument cluster, which really is a lot better than the standard cluster, which has an analog speedo, a digital tacho, and it just looks like a bit of a mess. The fully digital cluster gives you both blind spot cameras where you would expect them instead of sharing one half, which is a bit of a mental trip I found. So this is actually the package that you want, and the Lexicon stereo sounds absolutely brilliant. What's cool though is that all GV70s have heated and cooled seats. We do have the optional heated steering wheel here as well, which is actually particularly pleasant on cold winter mornings, and we're getting quite a few of those at the moment. Material quality is all really good in this car, feels really high end. There's a bit of a rattle in the sunroof of this particular vehicle, but it is an early arrival into the country, so sometimes you do get that. And in terms of practicality, we've got decent sized cup holders, really cool vertical wireless charging, and a big bin between the seats. So up front, The GV70 is really quite convincing, I reckon. Let's check out the back seat. The GV70 is a mid-size SUV, so it doesn't have to be enormous here in the second row, but it's big enough. For myself, it's 6 foot underneath this panoramic sunroof. Headroom is good, legroom is fine, tow room is also fine, despite these big chunky seats up front. Now, you'll be able to get 3 people in here if you need to, though it is more of a 4-seat vehicle. If you need that extra row, they've got the GV80 for that. And in terms of amenities, we've got heated rear seats, we've got a flip down armrest with 2 cup holders in it, and we've got 2 more USB ports plus rear air vents. Now, we do have controls here on the passenger seat to annoy someone sitting in it. We've got a sun blind in each rear window, but I'd also just like to quickly point out some of the attention to detail, which is really nice in this car. So the coat hooks are this really nice knurled cold metal, just a small thing, but if you know, the once a week or once a month you use that, you're gonna realize it was a quality product. And also, not only is there leather up here on the door, but the soft touch materials extends right down to where you would almost never find it in a rival car, which is around the speaker. All that area that you accidentally kick when you get in and out of the car is actually soft in this vehicle. Not too soft, but just, you know, refined and luxurious rather than hard plastic. Moving around here to the back of the Genesis GV70, it's now obvious exactly where this brand are going in terms of their visual signature, because the car does look like a scaled down version of that GV80 that I've been running for the last half year or so. And that's a good thing, because the proportions actually suit this slightly smaller crossover even better. And I'm a fan of these dual strake lights. I do think it is a bit of a shame that the trick dual indicators that were such a big deal on the GV80 and G80 sedan haven't been replicated here. At the back, the indicator is back down in the bumper, something that Hyundai loves doing, and you can't see the indicators when the car's stopped in front of you at the lights. And sadly, around the side, the repeaters don't have that dual shape, which is so cool on the GV80, but they're really the only visual criticisms I've got, because I actually really like the way this SUV looks. Again, like the GV80, the button to operate the power tailgate is located in the windscreen wiper, though I do notice some of you have said that you would have preferred the windscreen wiper to be hidden away up the top. That's a fair criticism. Anyway, the boot opens up to reveal 542 litres of space, which is, you know, pretty much on a par with the other vehicles in this segment, slightly smaller than some. You will notice that it's actually almost like a fastback in terms of the rear end design, so that's going to take away some of your vertical height in the boot, but the 3 chasing cars suitcases still fit in really easily and nicely. So the size is middling, but the boot does have a few special features. We've got remote tabs to fold down the second row seat, and then underneath this extra carpeting, which is double-sided, we have the cargo blind stored under the boot, and also a space saver spare, which is one up on the GV80 that actually runs with only a tire inflation kit. Then we've got buttons up here to either close the boot or close it and lock the car. Last step before we take the GV70 out onto the road is to talk about the running costs of this vehicle. And this is where Genesis really does score a few points on the ongoing costs. And that's because the servicing is actually included for the first 5 years, and it's the only vehicle in this segment to offer that. The warranty on the GV70 is 5 years with unlimited kilometers, matching vehicles like the GLC, XC60 and Discovery Sport, and better than the Q5 and X3. And fuel consumption, look, that's where the catch comes along with the 3.5 litre engine. This will use around 13-14 litres per 100 Ks in combined driving, though I have personally been tapping into the performance here and there. The most frugal option is the 2.2 litre diesel, and the 2 litre petrol, which is also available in rear drive, splits the difference with around 10 litres per 100 Ks combined. So back behind the wheel of the GV70, this time to take this SUV for a drive. Well, what's it like? Well, for starters, it's pretty quick and it sounds good, particularly in 3.5 litre form, although all of the models have enhanced sound pumped into the interior through the speakers. The difference with the petrol V6 is that it actually makes a really good sound naturally, so you can turn that function off safely and know that you'll still be hearing something pretty cool. So I'll run you through the engines first, and then we'll talk about the ride and handling for this vehicle, which wasn't completely done in Australia, but was certainly influenced by Australian roads. So the range starts off with the new for Genesis 2.5 litre turbo petrol 4-cylinder, making 224 kilowatts of power and 422 newton meters of torque. Now those figures are pretty good, and I did spend a few days driving the 4-cylinder before I jumped into this V6. Honestly, the 4-cylinder feels more like a cruiser. You're content to kind of drive it around a bit more patiently. After that, you step up a few grand more to a 2.2 litre diesel. Now that's not a Genesis exclusive engine. It's shared with the Santa Fe and the Kia Sorento. It makes 154 kilowatts of power and a good slab of torque, and it's also the most frugal engine. So for a lot of people, it'll make sense, and it gives Genesis a direct rival to vehicles like the Audi Q5 40 TDI. But it's also the most rational of the engines. It's a bit of a shame Genesis didn't squeeze the new 3 litre inline 6-cylinder diesel from the GV80 under the bonnet though, but I assume there's a packaging issue there. Then you step up to the daddy of the lineup, the 3.5 turbocharged V6. Again, this is a Genesis engine, hasn't been used elsewhere in the range so far, or in the Hyundai Kia universe. And we've got pretty good numbers, 279 kilowatts of power and 530 newton meters of torque. And that's enough to make the GV70 feel seriously spirited. You know, I'm not making it up. If you take it for a test drive, you'll find that the 3.5, you know, it widens your eyes at how responsive it is, and particularly this really chunky mid-range that you get. It's quick, it's, you know, it really gets up and goes. The 0 to 100 claim is 5.1 seconds. That puts it up there with an SQ5 TDI. It's about half a second behind an AMG GLC 43. So it's not the fastest, but it's way cheaper. With all the options on this car, you're looking at about 90 grand before on-road costs, so just under 100,000 drive away. That's 30 grand less than an AMG GLC 43 that has no options. It's 20 grand less than an SQ5 TDI. So you can see that unlike the GV80, which isn't that much cheaper than rivals, the GV70 has really swooped in a good 20 to 30% less than the competition, while having a pretty good level of equipment inside and some pretty nice engines. So all of those bona fides are very much there. Let's talk about the ride and handling, because this really differs depending on which model you go for and what options you tick. So the base car has 19-inch wheels and fixed suspension, and it's reasonably comfortable and reasonably compliant. There's a chunky sidewall, it soaks up the bumps pretty well, but you really want the adaptive dampers. It's exactly the same as on the GV80. Even though you have to step up to a bigger wheel, in this case 21 inches, to get the adaptive dampers, there's a real payoff, because there's clearly two suspension tunes going on here. One for the fixed suspension and small wheels, and another for the big wheels and adaptive dampers. And the adaptively damped big wheel package is actually they've got it to a better point. It's more resolved, it's more balanced. Not only does the car handle better, but I actually think it's more compliant over almost all bumps, apart from continuous complex bumps where it can get a little bit flummoxed, and the sidewall of the 19-inch tire package helps kind of insulate you in that old school sense. But here in the 3.5, with the standard 21s and adaptive dampers, it's actually really tidy. The car sits remarkably flat in the corners. Turn-in is pretty quick. The steering is not as consistent as an SQ5 or an X3 M40i, but it's reasonable enough. You know what you're going to get from the front wheels. The tyres are Michelin Pilot Sport 4 SUV across the range, which is a really good tyre for a vehicle like this. Lots of grip. But what I love is that while you can get a rear drive base model, even if you go for all-wheel drive, it's still very rear biased. And if you plant the boot, even with ESC fully on, you'll definitely feel that squirm from the back wheels, which is really pleasant on a country road. You can even turn the ESC completely off in Sport Plus mode, which is a little scary in a tall vehicle like this with so much torque, but you don't really need to, because the stability control calibration is right, even in fully on mode. And that's something, along with the suspension, that Genesis engineers before the pandemic actually did quite a lot of work on here in Australia, and then Genesis locally have accepted that global tune. It hasn't been fully retuned for Australia, which is becoming more common for Hyundai and Genesis products locally. They used to all be given a custom tune, but less and less does that seem to be required. Finally, on the safety front, we've got plenty of tech, adaptive cruise, lane keep assist that's really quite strong, blind spot cameras, absolutely fantastic technology. They really work way better than normal blind spot monitoring. Got a crisp 360-degree camera, so all in all it feels bang up to the minute in terms of that sort of tech. So those are my first impressions of the new Genesis GV70, the model this brand really had to do to take on the NX, the X3, the GLC, the Q5, etc. The good news is that despite being a bit cheaper than most of those cars, the GV70 really does stand up out on the road, particularly if you go for the 3.5, which I think is something quite special, even if it's not the most frugal of the options. Still, I'm keen to know your view. Let me know down below in the comments whether you'd be considering a GV70 for your next luxury SUV buy. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.